I never thought I'd see a mansion when I drove to visit my dying sister-in-law. But there it was, 3 stories of white columns, marble steps, and a fountain that sparkled like it belonged in a magazine. The kind of place that whispered money with every perfectly trimmed hedge and gleaming window. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I blinked twice, maybe 3 times, thinking the grief was playing tricks on me. That maybe losing Harold a month ago had finally broken something in my brain. But no. The mailbox confirmed it in neat gold letters. C. Fenton. Clara Fenton. Harold's sister. The woman who was supposed to be dying from some nerve condition. The woman my husband had been sending money to for 5 years. Our money, our savings, our retirement, because she was too sick to work, too fragile to manage, too helpless to survive without us. Except the woman standing in front of this palace didn't look helpless at all. A guard appeared at the gate, uniform pressed, face professional. He leaned toward my car window with the kind of polite distance rich people pay for. "Can I help you, ma'am?" "I'm here to see Mrs. Fenton." My voice came out steadier than I felt. He nodded, spoke into his radio, waited. Then his expression shifted, just slightly, like he'd been given instructions he didn't quite understand. "She says she doesn't know anyone by that name." The words hit me like cold water. "Tell her it's Margaret, Harold's wife." He hesitated, spoke again. This time, after a long pause, he waved me through. The driveway felt endless. Every flower bed I passed, every stone statue, every perfectly placed tree screamed one thing: wealth. The kind Harold and I never had. The kind we'd sacrificed for. The kind we'd been told didn't exist in Clara's world because she was struggling, suffering, barely surviving. I parked in front of the entrance, my old sedan looking like a stray dog next to the sleek black car already sitting there. My legs shook as I stepped out. The front door opened before I could knock. Clara stood there in linen pants and a silk blouse, sunglasses pushed up on her head like she'd just come back from brunch. Her face was pale, but her posture was strong. Healthy. Alive. Not dying. Not even close. Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. Margaret. She said my name like an apology she didn't want to make. "I told you not to come." I looked past her into the house. Marble floors stretched toward a chandelier that probably cost more than my car. The air smelled like cinnamon and furniture polish, the expensive kind. "You said you were sick, Clara." She shifted her weight, glanced behind her like someone might be listening. I was. "It's complicated. Complicated doesn't buy mansions." Her jaw tightened. She stepped aside, not quite inviting me in, but not blocking me either. I walked past her, my shoes squeaking against floors so polished I could see my reflection. She closed the door. The sound echoed through halls that seemed to stretch forever. "He wanted me to have this," she said finally, her voice quiet but firm. "Harold made sure I'd be comfortable." The room tilted. My chest tightened. Blood rushed in my ears. "With our money?" Clara didn't answer. She just stood there, her expensive shoes planted on expensive floors, looking at me with something between guilt and defiance. Like a child caught stealing but convinced they deserved it anyway. I stood in that beautiful, terrible house, surrounded by everything my husband had built for someone else, and felt 50 years of trust crack open like glass under my feet. The silence stretched between us. Outside, the fountain kept running. Inside, my world kept breaking. She finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Margaret, you don't understand." "Then make me understand." My voice shook. "Make me understand how a woman who couldn't afford medication lives in a place like this." She looked away, and in that moment I knew. Whatever Harold had done, whatever lies he'd told, whatever money he'd hidden, this mansion was just the beginning. Because betrayal never comes alone. It brings friends. What would you do if you discovered a lie like this after 50 years of marriage? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more real-life justice stories. I met Harold Fenton when I was 21 years old, and I thought I knew everything about love. He walked into the diner where I was celebrating my nursing school graduation, hair slicked back, wearing a blue shirt that matched his eyes. My friend Sarah nudged me so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. "That's him," she whispered. "That's the guy I told you about. The engineer." Harold wasn't flashy. He didn't swagger or show off. When he smiled at me from across the room, it was quiet, steady. The kind of smile that promised safety instead of excitement. And God, I wanted safety. My father had died 2 years before, leaving my mother alone with 3 kids and a mountain of debt. I'd watched her work herself into exhaustion, watched her trust the wrong men, watched her cry when the bills came due. So when Harold asked me to dinner that night, I said yes because he looked like the kind of man who paid his bills on time. I was right about that part, at least. Our first date was at a burger joint near the river. He told me about his job, electrical engineering, steady pay, good benefits. He asked about my nursing plans. He listened when I talked, really listened, not just waiting for his turn to speak. "You're going to be great at that," he said when I told him I wanted to work with elderly patients. "You've got kind eyes." 3 months later, he proposed with a ring he'd saved 6 months to buy. My mother cried happy tears. My friends said I was lucky. And I believed them because Harold fixed the broken porch steps before the wedding, paid off my student loans as a wedding gift, and promised me we'd build something solid together. For 20 years, we did exactly that. We bought a small house outside Louisville with a backyard big enough for kids to play in. Gregory came first, then Helen 3 years later. Harold worked long hours, but always came home for dinner. Always kissed me goodnight. Always left little notes on the fridge that said things like, "Coffee's ready," or "Love you, Maggie." I thought that was what forever looked like. Ordinary. Comfortable. Safe. But looking back now, I see the cracks I ignored. The way Harold never talked about his family, unless I asked. The way he'd disappear into his study some nights, door closed, papers rustling. The way he'd pat my hand when I questioned our finances and say, "Don't worry about it. I've got it handled." I thought silence was a sign of strength. I was wrong, because silence doesn't protect you. It just gives secrets room to grow. Harold retired when he turned 65. We had plans, small ones, realistic ones. A used RV to drive through the Midwest. Morning coffee by the lake. Maybe visit Helen in Colorado once the grandkids were old enough to remember us. Simple dreams for simple people. But those dreams cost money. And somewhere along the way, without me noticing, our money had started disappearing. Not all at once. Just a little here, a little there. Like someone slowly draining a bathtub while you're busy washing your hair. By the time I looked down, the water was almost gone. And Harold just kept saying, "Family comes first, Maggie. You understand that, don't you?" Back then, I thought I did. Can love truly hide deceit? Hit like if you've ever trusted someone completely. The first check Harold sent to Clara was for $300. I remember because I was balancing our checkbook when I saw it, the carbon copy tucked between grocery receipts and electric bills. The memo line said medical expenses. "Who's this for?" I asked Harold that night over dinner. He looked up from his meatloaf, fork halfway to his mouth. "My sister. Clara. Remember her?" I did, barely. We'd met maybe twice at family reunions years ago. She was quiet, polite, always standing at the edge of conversations like she didn't quite belong. "What's wrong with her? Some kind of nerve condition." He stabbed at his green beans. "Doctors can't figure it out. She needs help with treatments." $300? It's not much, Maggie. She's family. The way he said it made me feel small. Selfish. Like I was the kind of person who'd let someone suffer over a few $100s. So I didn't push. The next month it was $500, then $7, then $1,000. Each time I asked, Harold's answers got shorter. "She needs it." The treatments are expensive. You wouldn't understand. That last phrase became his shield. Anytime I questioned the amounts, anytime I suggested we needed to save for our own retirement, he'd look at me with those blue eyes and say, "You wouldn't understand, Maggie. Clara's been through things." "What things?" I'd ask. He'd just shake his head and walk away. By the third year, our savings account looked anemic. The trips we'd planned kept getting postponed. The roof that needed fixing stayed broken. Harold started working odd jobs even after retirement, consulting work, he called it, and every extra dollar seemed to vanish. I started noticing other things too. The way he'd angle his computer screen when I walked into the study. The passwords he'd changed without telling me. The bank statements that arrived and disappeared into his desk drawer before I could see them. "Why won't you let me help with the finances?" I asked one morning. "Because I don't want you to worry." "I'm already worried, Harold." He set down his coffee, looked at me with something that might have been pity or might have been guilt. "Clara needs this more than we need a new roof, Maggie. Trust me." And because I'd trusted him for 30 years, because he'd never lied to me before, or so I thought, I backed down. I chose peace over truth. The notes started appearing around year 4. Little sticky notes on the checkbook or tucked into envelopes. For her medication. Emergency treatment. She needs this month's support early. Always her. Always need. Always urgent. Our daughter Helen called one Sunday, excited about a family trip she was planning. "Can you and Dad come to Colorado for Thanksgiving? The kids would love to see you." I wanted to say yes. The words were right there. But I looked at our bank balance and said, "Maybe next year, honey." After I hung up, Harold appeared in the doorway. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "For what?" "That we can't go." But he didn't stop sending money. Didn't slow down. Didn't explain. And I didn't push because I was tired of being told I wouldn't understand. The final year before Harold died, the amounts doubled. Sometimes tripled. He'd withdraw cash from ATMs, muttering about Clara needing help with property maintenance or repairs. "Property?" I asked. "I thought she rented." "It's complicated." There was that word again. Complicated. The word people use when the truth is too ugly to say out loud. The night before Harold's first heart attack, I couldn't sleep. I lay there listening to him breathe, watching shadows move across the ceiling, and thought about all the years I'd chosen silence over questions. All the times I'd swallowed my doubt because speaking up felt like betrayal. That night, for the first time in 50 years, I couldn't sleep beside my husband. Not because I didn't love him, but because I was starting to realize I didn't know him. Would you question your spouse or choose peace? Tell me in the comments. They say funerals bring families together, but Harold's funeral felt like standing alone in a crowded room. Gregory flew in from Seattle with his wife and kids, but they stayed at a hotel. Too expensive to stay longer than 3 days, he said. Helen drove up from Colorado, tears streaming down her face, but she had to leave right after the service. Work couldn't spare her more time. I stood at the grave watching them lower Harold into the ground, and all I could think was how quiet the house would be. The neighbors brought casseroles. The church ladies offered prayers. Everyone kept saying the same thing. At least he's at peace now. But I wasn't. Peace requires answers, and all Harold left me was questions wrapped in unpaid bills and a half-empty savings account. The kids left on a Tuesday. Helen hugged me tight and whispered, "Call if you need anything, Mom." Gregory shook my hand like I was a business associate and promised to check in. Then I was alone. The house felt different without Harold. Bigger somehow, but also smaller. Like it had shrunk around me until there was barely room to breathe. I spent the first week crying. The second week cleaning. By the third week, I ran out of things to do except face the one room I'd been avoiding. Harold's study. It wasn't locked. He'd never locked it. But stepping inside felt like trespassing anyway, like I was breaking some unspoken rule we'd lived by for 50 years. His desk was exactly how he'd left it, coffee mug with a ring stain, reading glasses folded on top of a stack of papers, a calendar with doctor's appointments he'd never keep. I started with the filing cabinet. Tax returns, insurance policies, mortgage papers. Everything organized, everything labeled. Harold was nothing if not meticulous. Then I found the box. Cardboard, about the size of a shoebox, sitting in the bottom drawer behind old instruction manuals. No lock. No tape. Just a piece of masking tape on top with 2 words written in Harold's careful handwriting. Clara's papers. My hands shook as I lifted the lid. Inside were receipts. Dozens of them. Wire transfers, bank statements, payment confirmations. All addressed to Clara Fenton at different locations. The first few made sense. Medical invoices from a clinic in Lexington. Pharmacy receipts. A hospital bill for an MRI. But then the addresses started changing. One receipt showed a wire transfer to Clara at an address in Nashville. Another to Knoxville. Then Chattanooga. Like she was moving every few months, which didn't make sense for someone too sick to work. And the amounts kept growing. 2,000. 5,000. 10,000. I pulled out a bank statement from 8 months before Harold died. He'd withdrawn $15,000 in cash. The memo line said property maintenance. Property maintenance? But she rented. Didn't she? I kept digging. Found more receipts, more transfers, more notes in Harold's handwriting. For repairs. Roof replacement. New furnace. Repairs for what? My chest felt tight. The room felt hot. At the bottom of the box, I found a photocopy of a deed. Property in Tennessee. 3 acres. Purchase price, $250,000. Paid in full. Cash. The buyer's name, Clara Fenton. But there at the bottom of the document, another signature. Co-signer, Harold Fenton. I sat on the floor of Harold's study, holding that paper, and the room started spinning. Not from grief. From rage. $250,000. Our retirement. Our savings. The money we were supposed to use for the RV trips and the lake house, and visiting our grandkids. Gone. Not to medical bills. Not to keep Clara alive. To buy her property. That night, sleep refused me, and suspicion took its place. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation Harold and I had about money. Every time he'd told me not to worry. Every time he'd said Clara needed help. Had he been lying the whole time? Or had he convinced himself it was the truth? And if he'd lied about this, what else had he hidden? The next morning, I did something I'd never done before. I called Clara. If your partner's secret came to light after death, would you dig for the truth? Or let it rest? The phone rang 4 times before she answered. Hello. Clara's voice was warm. Chipper even. Like someone who'd just finished their morning coffee on a sunny porch. Clara, it's Margaret. Harold's wife. A pause. Just long enough to be noticeable. Oh, Margaret. How are you holding up? The question felt rehearsed. Polite but distant, like she was reading from a script. I'm managing. I gripped the phone tighter. I was actually hoping I could come visit you. To pay respects. Maybe share some memories of Harold. Another pause. Longer this time. Oh dear, that's very thoughtful, but I'm not well enough for company right now. The treatments, they leave me exhausted. Her voice was smooth. Too smooth. Like river stones worn down by years of practice. It wouldn't be long, I pressed. Just an afternoon. I'd love to see you. Margaret, I really don't think. I found some of Harold's papers. Receipts. Addresses. I just want to make sure everything's been taken care of. For his sake. The silence that followed felt like falling. I appreciate that, she said finally, but it's really not necessary. Harold was very thorough. Everything's fine. Fine. That word people use when things are anything but. I understand. I lied. Take care of yourself, Clara. You too, Margaret. I hung up and sat there staring at the phone, my heart pounding. Something in her tone felt off. Too careful. Too controlled. Like someone trying very hard to sound sick while standing in perfect health. That afternoon, I pulled out the box again and found the most recent address Harold had sent money to. A place outside Nashville. Maple Ridge Lane. I'd never heard of it. I looked it up online. The street name pulled up luxury real estate listings. Gated communities. Estates starting at $500,000. My stomach dropped. That couldn't be right. Clara was sick. Struggling. Living off Harold's help just to survive. Wasn't she? I called Gregory that evening. Mom? Everything okay? Do you know anything about Harold helping Clara? His sister? Aunt Clara? He sounded confused. I didn't even know he had a sister. He never mentioned her? Not that I remember. Why? I didn't know how to answer that without sounding crazy. No reason. Just sorting through some old papers. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet house and made a decision. If Clara wouldn't tell me the truth, I'd go find it myself. The drive to Nashville took 3 hours. I left early on a Thursday morning, telling myself I was being ridiculous. That there had to be a reasonable explanation. That Harold wouldn't have lied to me for 5 years. But my hands shook on the steering wheel anyway. I followed the GPS through winding roads and tree-lined streets until I reached a sign that said, Maple Ridge Lane, private community. Private. Of course it was. I slowed down, looking for house numbers, expecting to find a modest home. Maybe a small apartment. Something that matched the story Harold had told me. But when I turned the corner, my foot slammed on the brake. Because there, rising up against perfectly blue sky, was a mansion. White columns. 3 stories. Marble steps leading to double doors that gleamed in the morning sun. A fountain in the circular driveway, water sparkling like diamonds. And on the mailbox, in perfect gold script, C. Fenton. I sat there in my car, engine idling, staring at a house that cost more than everything Harold and I had earned in our entire lives combined. This couldn't be Clara's house. It couldn't be. But it was. And somehow, my husband had paid for it. Have you ever ignored your instincts, only to regret it later? Comment yes if you have. The guard at the gate looked at me like I'd driven up to the wrong address. Maybe I had. Maybe this was all some terrible mistake and Clara actually lived in a modest house down the street, and I'd just embarrassed myself by stopping at a mansion that didn't belong to her. But the mailbox said otherwise. C. Fenton. Can I help you, ma'am? The guard leaned toward my window, his uniform crisp enough to cut paper. I'm here to see Mrs. Fenton. He nodded, spoke into his radio, listened. Then his face changed, just barely, but enough for me to notice. Like someone had told him something unexpected. She says she doesn't know anyone by that name. My heart lurched. Tell her it's Margaret, Harold's wife. The words felt heavy in my mouth. Harold's wife. Like that title still meant something. Like it had ever meant what I thought it did. He spoke into the radio again. Waited. This time the pause stretched so long, I thought he might ask me to leave. Then he stepped back and opened the gate. She'll see you. Follow the drive to the front entrance. The driveway curved through landscaping that belonged in a magazine. Every bush trimmed to perfection. Every flower bed arranged like art. Stone lions guarding the walkway like this was some kind of palace. I parked next to a sleek black car that probably cost more than my house. My legs felt weak as I got out. The air smelled like cut grass and money, that specific scent of a place where people don't worry about bills or broken roofs or whether they can afford to visit their grandkids. The front door opened before I reached it. Clara stood there looking like she'd stepped out of a catalog. Linen pants that hung perfectly. A silk blouse the color of cream. Sunglasses pushed up on her head like she'd just come from somewhere important. Not sick. Not dying. Not struggling. Healthy. Comfortable. Wealthy. Margaret. She said my name the way you'd say a problem you'd hoped would go away. I told you not to come. I looked past her into the house. The entryway alone was bigger than my living room. Marble floors stretched toward a staircase that curved up to the second floor. A chandelier hung overhead, crystal drops catching the light like tiny stars. You said you were sick, Clara. She glanced behind her, then back at me. I was. It's complicated. That word again. The word Harold had used to shut down every question I'd ever asked. Complicated doesn't buy mansions. Her jaw tightened. For a second, I thought she might close the door in my face. But then she stepped aside, not quite inviting me in, not quite blocking me either. I walked past her. My shoes squeaked against floors so shiny I could see myself in them, a 72-year-old woman in discount store clothes standing in a house that shouldn't exist. Clara closed the door. The sound echoed through rooms I couldn't even see yet. Harold wanted me to have this, she said quietly. He made sure I'd be comfortable. The words hit me like a physical blow. With our money? My voice came out shakier than I wanted. With the money we saved for retirement? The money we needed? She didn't answer. Just stood there in her expensive clothes and her expensive house looking at me with something that might have been guilt or might have been defiance. He loved you, Margaret. He did. But he owed me this. Owed you? The room tilted. Owed you what? She looked away. Stared at a painting on the wall that probably cost more than Harold's funeral. We had an understanding. Harold and I. From a long time ago. What kind of understanding? But she just shook her head. You should go. Not until you tell me the truth. The truth. She turned back to me, and for the first time I saw something crack in her perfect composure. The truth is Harold made his choice. He chose to take care of me. That's all you need to know. My hands were shaking. My whole body was shaking. He told me you were dying. I never asked him to lie to you. But she hadn't stopped him either. Hadn't told me the truth. Hadn't cared that every dollar Harold sent her was a dollar we didn't have. I looked around that beautiful house one more time, at the chandelier and the marble and the artwork and the furniture that whispered wealth in every curve and corner. Then I looked at Clara. You can keep the house, I said quietly. But you'll have to live with what it cost. I walked out without waiting for her response. My hands shook so badly, I could barely start the car. I sat in that circular driveway with the fountain running and the flowers blooming and the mansion looming behind me, and I cried. Not for Harold. Not yet. For the fool I'd been. For 50 years of trust that turned out to be made of paper. Then I drove home and started digging for the truth Clara wouldn't give me. Do you believe money can buy peace of mind? Like this video if you think not. The lawyer's office smelled like old books and coffee. Mr. Blakemore was a friend of a friend, someone Helen had recommended when I called her crying about the mansion. He was in his 60s, gray hair, kind eyes, the type of man who'd seen enough of life's ugliness not to be shocked by it anymore. Mrs. Fenton. He shook my hand gently. I'm so sorry for your loss. Thank you. I sat in the leather chair across from his desk, my purse clutched in my lap like a shield. Helen tells me you've found some concerning financial documents. Concerning? That was a polite way to put it. I pulled out the box of papers I'd brought. Every receipt, every bank statement, every wire transfer I'd found in Harold's study. I'd spent 2 weeks going through them, organizing them, trying to make sense of numbers that didn't add up to anything except betrayal. Mr. Blakemore put on his reading glasses and started going through them. His expression stayed neutral at first, professional. But as he kept reading, his eyebrows drew together. How long did your husband send money to his sister? 5 years. Maybe longer. I only found records going back 5 years. He pulled out a calculator, started adding numbers. The clicking sound filled the quiet office. Mrs. Fenton, according to these records, your husband transferred approximately $400,000 to Clara Fenton over the past 5 years. The number hung in the air like smoke. $400,000. That was our retirement, our savings, our life. But that's not all, Mr. Blakemore continued, pulling out another document. These property records show that Harold co-signed on at least 3 real estate purchases, all under Clara's name. My mouth went dry. 3? A house in Lexington, a rental property in Knoxville, and the estate in Nashville you visited. He looked up at me over his glasses. Mrs. Fenton, did you sign any of these documents?
No.
Did Harold ever mention these purchases to you? He said Clara was sick, that she needed help with medical bills. Mr. Blakemore set down the papers and folded his hands. I'm going to be honest with you. This is going to be difficult to hear. My chest tightened.
Tell me.
Based on these documents, your husband wasn't just helping his sister. He was building a portfolio of properties with her. Every purchase was made in cash, probably to avoid mortgage applications that would have required your signature as a spouse. The room felt smaller, hotter. Joint investments, he continued. All of them registered primarily under Clara's name, with Harold as co-signer, which means legally she owns them, but he paid for them. With our money, with your marital assets, yes. I thought about all the times Harold had told me not to worry, all the times he'd said he had it handled, all the times he'd kissed my forehead and promised everything would be okay. Can I get any of it back? Mr. Blakemore's expression told me the answer before he said it. It's complicated. There was that word again. The properties are in Clara's name. The transfers were made willingly. Harold's signature is on every document. Unless you can prove fraud or forgery, which seems unlikely given the paper trail, these were legal transactions. Legal doesn't make them right. No, he agreed quietly. It doesn't. He pulled out one more document from the bottom of my stack.
A deed.
Recent, dated just 6 months before Harold died. This one is particularly concerning, he said. The Nashville property, the mansion you visited. It was purchased for $800,000. Paid in full.
Cash.
$800,000. I couldn't breathe.
Couldn't think.
The number was too big to fit inside my head. Where did he get that kind of money? Mr. Blakemore flipped through more papers. He liquidated your retirement accounts, took out a reverse mortgage on your home, cashed in life insurance policies. Each word was a hammer blow. He mortgaged our house. I'm afraid so. The room spun. I gripped the arms of the chair to keep from falling. Mrs. Fenton, you should sit down. I am sitting down, but I felt like I was falling anyway. Through the floor, through the earth, through 50 years of marriage that suddenly looked like quicksand. Mr. Blakemore came around the desk and handed me a glass of water. I drank it without tasting it. There's one more thing, he said gently. The last property purchase. The mansion. Look at the signature date. I looked. My vision blurred, but I could still read it. March 15th. Harold had died April 3rd. He'd bought Clara a mansion 3 weeks before his heart gave out. 3 weeks. He'd known he was dying. The doctors had warned him after the first heart attack. And he'd used those final weeks to make sure Clara was taken care of. Not me. Not his wife of 50 years. Not the woman who'd raised his children and stood by his side and trusted him with everything.
Clara.
There, on the deed, his name stared back at me in bold ink. H. Fenton. Would you want to know the full truth, even if it destroyed your memories? Comment your thoughts. I didn't eat for 3 days after that meeting.
Couldn't.
Every time I tried, my stomach twisted and the food tasted like ash. I'd sit at the kitchen table where Harold and I had eaten thousands of meals together and stare at his empty chair. Had he felt guilty sitting there? Had he looked at me across the table and felt anything at all? Or had I just been the convenient wife who asked too few questions? I kept finding things, little things that suddenly meant something different. The time Harold insisted we didn't need a new car because ours ran fine. The Christmas he'd said we should skip gifts and keep things simple. The anniversary when he'd forgotten to make reservations and claimed he'd been too busy with work. Too busy funneling money to Clara. Every memory was poison now. Gregory called on a Thursday. Mom, Helen's worried about you. She says you're not answering your phone. I'm fine. You don't sound fine. How do you tell your son that his father was a liar? That the man who taught him to ride a bike and throw a baseball had spent years building a secret life with someone else? Did Dad ever talk to you about Aunt Clara? I asked instead.
Who?
His sister. Mom, I didn't even know he had a sister until you mentioned her last month. Why? Because your father gave her everything. Because he chose her over us. Because I'm 72 years old and just now realizing I never really knew him at all. No reason, I said. I love you, Gregory. I love you too, Mom. Please take care of yourself. After I hung up, I went back to Harold's study and pulled out the box for the 100th time. There were letters I hadn't read yet. Personal ones. I'd avoided them because reading Harold's words felt too intimate, too painful. But I needed to understand. The first letter was dated 3 years ago. Clara, enclosed is this month's payment. I know things have been tight, but I promise I'll always take care of you. You're the only family I have who understands. Love always, Harold. The only family who understands.
Not me.
Not his wife. Not his children. Clara. I opened another letter. Then another. They were all the same. Promises. Assurances. Affection. You deserve this. I wish I could do more. Don't worry. Maggie doesn't know. That last line appeared in 4 different letters. Maggie doesn't know. Like I was the problem. The obstacle between him and his generosity. The person he had to hide from. I sat on the floor of his study surrounded by proof that my marriage had been a performance, and I finally let myself feel the rage I'd been swallowing for weeks. He'd lied. For years. To my face. While I'd worried about bills and stretched every dollar and told our kids we couldn't afford to visit them. And Clara had let him. She could have told me.
Could have stopped him.
Could have done anything except money she knew was stolen from his family. But she'd taken it anyway. Every check. Every wire transfer. Every piece of my future. I called her that night. My hands shook as I dialed. She answered on the 3rd ring. Margaret.
Why?
My voice broke. Why did you let him do this? Silence. Why did you take our money? Why didn't you tell me? Harold wanted to help me. He destroyed us to help you. I never asked him to, but you took it anyway. The words came out sharp. You took everything while his wife wore clothes from thrift stores and his kids went years without seeing him because we couldn't afford plane tickets. Margaret, you don't understand. Then make me understand. But she just hung up. I sat there holding the phone, listening to dead air, and something inside me shifted. I couldn't get the money back. Couldn't undo what Harold had done. Couldn't change the fact that my marriage had been built on lies. But I didn't have to stay silent. The letter arrived 2 weeks later from Clara's lawyer. All assets were gifted voluntarily. Mrs. Fenton has no legal obligation to return any property or funds. Further harassment will be considered a legal matter. Voluntarily. What a cruel word. But justice, I realized, doesn't always wear a judge's robe. Sometimes it wears ink and paper and truth. Ever been betrayed by someone you loved? Tap that heart if this story hits home. I never thought of myself as a writer. Harold was the one with the neat handwriting, the organized thoughts. I was the one who kept grocery lists and wrote birthday cards. But grief has a funny way of teaching you new skills. I started writing on a Tuesday morning in June. Just for myself at first. A journal entry about finding the mansion. About Clara's face when she said he wanted me to have this. About the way 50 years of marriage had crumbled like dry bread. The words came faster than I expected. Angrier. More honest than I'd been with anyone, including myself. By the end of the week, I had 20 pages. By the end of the month, I had a story. My neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, stopped by with pound cake one afternoon and found me on the porch with my notebook. What are you working on, dear? Just writing some things down. She peered over her glasses at me. About Harold? I nodded. Good, she said firmly. People need to know what happened. He seemed like such a nice man. That's when the idea struck me. The local newspaper had a community column called Our Stories, where residents could share personal essays. I'd read it every Sunday over coffee. Stories about war veterans and family recipes and dogs that saved their owners' lives. What if I told my story? Not for revenge. Not to drag Harold's name through the mud. But because the truth deserved to live. Because maybe somewhere another woman was sitting at her kitchen table wondering why the money kept disappearing and her husband kept saying, "Don't worry." Because silence had protected Harold's secrets long enough. I spent 2 weeks refining the essay. Made it shorter, clearer. Removed names that didn't matter. Focused on the facts. Then I sent it to the paper with a simple note. This is my story. I think other people should hear it. The editor called 3 days later. Mrs. Fenton, I read your submission. I'm so sorry for what you went through. Thank you. I'd like to publish it. With your permission, of course. We'd use your real name, and that's fine. You're sure?
This is a small town.
People will talk. Let them talk. The essay ran on a Sunday in late July. The headline read, The Sister in the Mansion. One woman's story of hidden betrayal. I didn't read the comments online. Didn't want to see people defend Harold or accuse me of airing dirty laundry or tell me I should have known. But Mrs. Patterson brought over a stack of papers the next morning. Margaret, you need to see this. Letters.
Dozens of them.
From readers. From women who'd experienced something similar. From men who'd watched their mothers go through financial betrayal. From people who said, "Thank you for being brave enough to speak up." One letter stood out. It was from a woman named Ruth. Dear Margaret, I read your story 3 times. My husband died last year, and I found out he'd been sending money to his business partner for a decade. Turned out the business partner was a woman he'd been supporting. I felt so alone until I read your words. Thank you for showing me I'm not crazy. Thank you for telling the truth. I sat on my porch reading those letters and cried. But this time not from grief. From relief. Because the truth was out. And Clara could no longer hide behind Harold's silence. Word spread the way it does in small towns. The country club where Clara used to visit when she came through town suddenly became less welcoming. Invitations stopped arriving. When she showed up at the grocery store during one of her rare visits back, people turned away. Not with anger. With something worse. Disappointment. Judgment. The quiet kind that doesn't need words. Mrs. Patterson heard through a friend who heard through a cousin that Clara had tried to host a charity event at the mansion. Only 3 people showed up. 6 months after my essay published, I got a phone call from a real estate agent. Mrs. Fenton? I'm calling about the property on Maple Ridge Lane. It's been listed for sale. The owner said you might be interested in knowing. Why would I be interested? She said, she said she thought you'd want to know she was selling it. Clara was selling the mansion. I thanked the agent and hung up. Part of me wanted to feel victorious. To call Clara and ask her how it felt to lose the palace she'd built on stolen dreams. But I didn't. Because I'd already won. Not by taking her mansion. Not by destroying her reputation. By refusing to let the truth die with Harold. She built her kingdom on deceit. And she watched it crumble in silence. 1 year later, I learned she'd sold the mansion for half what Harold paid for it. Do you believe karma always finds its way? Share your thoughts below. I visit Harold's grave once a month now. Always on Thursdays. Always in the morning when the cemetery is quiet and the light falls soft through the oak trees. I bring flowers, not the expensive kind, just whatever's on sale at the grocery store. Daisies usually. Sometimes carnations. Not because he deserves them, but because forgiveness isn't about what people deserve. It's about what sets you free. The first time I visited after learning everything, I couldn't speak. just stood there staring at his name carved in granite, wondering how you mourn someone who betrayed you. But grief and anger can't live in the same space forever. One of them has to leave. I chose to let the anger go. Not for Harold.
For me.
You gave her comfort, I whispered to the headstone that first day. But you gave me strength. And I meant it. Because discovering Harold's lies forced me to become someone I'd never been before. Independent. Vocal. Unafraid to demand truth. The house is paid off now, barely. I sold some of Harold's tools and his boat, and the riding mower he'd loved. Used the money to cover the reverse mortgage. It wasn't easy, but I did it. On my own. Gregory visits more now. Says he wants to make sure I'm okay. We talk about things we never talked about before, real things, honest things. He apologized once for not being around more after the funeral. You didn't know, I told him. None of us knew. Helen calls every Sunday. She keeps asking if I'm angry at her father. I tell her. But anger is exhausting. And I'm too old to be tired. What I don't tell her is that I still love him sometimes. Not the man I discovered in those papers. But the one I thought I knew. The one who fixed porch steps and left coffee notes. That Harold probably never existed. But the love I felt for him was real. And you can't build a life on lies, but you can rebuild one on truth. Last month, I got a letter from Clara. No return address. Just a single piece of paper. Margaret, I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything. But I need you to know I'm sorry. I read it once. Then put it in a drawer. Maybe one day I'll forgive her too. But forgiveness has its own timeline, and I'm not there yet. For now, I have my stories. My writing. The truth I chose to share. The local paper asked me to write a monthly column. Real talk from real people, they're calling it. I write about life and loss and the things people don't say out loud. It doesn't pay much, but it pays in something better than money. Purpose. Standing at Harold's grave today, the morning sun warm on my shoulders, I realized something important. He thought he was protecting me by hiding the truth. Thought silence was kindness. But the greatest gift he could have given me was honesty. Even if it hurt. Even if it was ugly. Because truth lets you make real choices. Lies only let you live in someone else's story. I kneel down, place the daisies against his headstone, and whisper the same words I do every visit. I forgive you, Harold. Not for you. For me. Then I stand up, brush the grass off my knees, and walk back to my car. The past is written. The lies are exposed. The truth is told. And I'm still here. Stronger than I ever knew I could be. Because betrayal taught me something Harold never did. That I was enough. Just me. Without the lies. Without the secrets. Just Margaret Fenton. 72 years old. Writer. Mother. Survivor. And strength I've learned is the kind of wealth no one can steal. Not even death. If this story touched your heart, don't leave without liking, commenting, and subscribing. We share real stories of quiet justice every week, stories that remind us we're stronger than we think. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new story, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. Thank you for being part of this community. Until next time, remember, the truth may hurt, but silence hurts more.